Going silent is not enough. What she expects you to do. What if she's not shocked by your silence, because it's the very move she was waiting for? You think you've made a move. You pull away, disappear, stop replying. You go dark, you block her, delete old photos, maybe even change your number. And for a moment, you believe you've done something powerful, something rare, something that will make her sit up, gasp, and wonder, where did he go? But what if she doesn't? Welcome to Chill, Then Conquer, where silence speaks louder than noise, where pain becomes the teacher, and men rise, not by chasing, but by becoming. This is where strength is built quietly, where the world doesn't need to hear your plans because it will feel your presence. So stay, because here, we don't just talk, we transform. What if your silence is not disruption, but confirmation? Because here's the brutal truth most men refuse to face. She was expecting it. In today's world, no contact has become a script, a predictable ritual passed from man to man like a superstition. She breaks your heart, you go quiet. She knows the play, she's seen it before, and she's already figured out how it ends. You ghost, you sulk, you scroll through her stories. Maybe you post a cryptic quote or start lifting weights in silence. And deep down, you still hope she's watching. And guess what? She is watching, but not in the way you imagined. She watches like someone who already knows the next scene, like a magician watching a trick she taught you, like a god watching a prayer she no longer answers. Your silence isn't mystery, it's math. Your absence isn't power, it's pattern. Your distance isn't a move, it's a mirror she handed you. And that mirror? It reflects not her surprise, but your predictability. This is where the first Stoic fracture must occur. You must kill the fantasy of silence as power. Because Stoicism is not retreat, it is not silence for effect. It is silence that emerges from depth, not strategy. It is not absence, it is essence. True detachment is not about disappearing from her world. It's about disappearing from the illusion of who you thought you were with her. Because silence, without inner death and rebirth, is just a performance. So what now? What replaces this old, tired dance? It begins with this. You don't go silent to provoke. You go silent to purify. You go silent not to make her miss you, but to realize that you no longer need her attention as air. You go silent not to hurt, but to heal. Not to manipulate, but to metamorphose. And here's the paradox. The quieter you become, the more noise you make in her mind. Because a man who truly detaches becomes a black hole. He absorbs projection, he gives nothing back, he emits a gravity that she can feel but never reach again. And this isn't because he hates her, it's because he has gone somewhere she can no longer follow. But don't misunderstand, this isn't a game. If your silence is just a tactic, she'll feel it. If your absence is just a mask for pain, she'll know. And if you're still checking to see if she's watching, then you're not really gone. So here is your first real challenge. Can you vanish without hope? Can you leave not to be missed, but to be transformed? Because the goal isn't her regret. The goal is your resurrection. Every man thinks his breakup is unique, that his pain is sacred, that his silence is thunder. But most are just background noise in the chaos of her inbox. One more ghost trying to haunt her screen. Don't be that. Be the silence that never blinks. Be the question she can't answer. Be the man who doesn't come back, not because he hates her, but because he finally found the door out of his own delusion. You were never meant to disappear to punish her. You were meant to disappear to find yourself. Not in anger, not in pride, but in stillness, in the void where men are forged, in the furnace where need dies, in the temple where ego starves and essence wakes up. This is not about her anymore. It never was. And if your silence doesn't feel like fire, then you haven't gone deep enough. So don't just go no contact. Go no illusion. Stop playing her game with quieter moves. Burn the board. And when you finally realize that the only thing left to disconnect from is your own fantasy, you'll understand why real silence is sacred. Because silence is not absence, silence is soul. And the man who walks into silence not to be seen, but to be reborn, he never needs to be loud again. In the next part, we confront the brutal second step. What if the woman you're mourning never actually existed? We dive into the process of confronting your projection. We tear down the memory. We expose the illusion. Burning the illusion. Stop grieving who she never was. What if the woman you're mourning never actually existed? You say you're grieving. You say it still hurts. That something was real. That something was lost. But what exactly are you mourning? Her? Or the image you built of her? Because here's the second fracture of the Stoic path. You're not grieving the woman. You're grieving the projection. Let's be honest. You didn't fall in love with her completely. You fell in love with moments, with flashes of sweetness, with symbols, promises, hints. You saw softness in her voice and called it love. You saw attention in a text and called it commitment. You saw a few hours of heaven and called it eternity. But those moments were not her totality. They were fragments, accidents, maybe even manipulations. And yet, you built an empire in your mind based on those scraps. You named her my person, my soulmate, the one. But what if she was never any of those things? What if you didn't lose a queen, but a mirage? This is the root of the lingering pain. Not that she left, but that the illusion stayed. You see, grief unexamined becomes addiction. And like any addiction, you start returning to it, rereading old messages like a priest studies scripture, looking for signs, meanings, hidden truths. You revisit her smile in your head, replay her laugh, rehearse the last time she looked at you like you mattered. And none of it helps, because you're not healing, you're feeding a ghost. So what's the way out? It begins with brutal clarity. You must sit with your memory and put it on trial. Not with bitterness, not with vengeance, with discipline. Ask, who was she actually when I needed her most? What did she show me when there was no benefit for her in being kind? Was she capable of holding me in my darkest? Did she ever see me, or just her reflection in my attention? Write it down. Not who you wanted her to be, not who she was on your best nights, but who she was when her mask slipped. That's where the truth is, and that's what you must burn. Because you cannot build a new self while praying to the altar of a false past. And many men stay trapped for years, not because of a woman, but because of the idea of her. They compare every new connection to a fantasy they invented. They reject reality because the dream was sweeter. But dreams can't hold you, and illusions don't return your loyalty. So, if you want to walk forward, you must cremate the shrine. Here's your Stoic discipline now. When memory rises, don't chase it. Don't fight it either. Study it, then sever it. Remember, memory is not truth. Emotion is not evidence. And just because it felt powerful doesn't mean it was real. She might have laughed, touched you, held you, but if she abandoned you, disrespected you, forgot you, that was her truth. And truth, once seen, must not be edited. You don't escape the illusion by arguing with it. You escape it by standing in its fire. And yes, it will burn. It should burn. Because only fire can purify. Only fire can kill a ghost. And the ghost must die. You may think this is harsh, that it's unloving, that it erases what mattered. But it's the opposite. Burning the illusion is the highest form of respect for what actually happened. It's how you learn. It's how you grow. It's how you stop giving sacred names to people who never deserved them. Forgive yourself for dreaming, but punish the part of you that refuses to wake up. Because every time you replay a fantasy, you poison the present. You stall your evolution. You delay your becoming. And she is not worth that. Not her memory, not her beauty, not her ghost. And here's the final truth. You cannot grieve a person who never existed. You can only release them. And once you do, everything changes. The weight leaves your chest. The noise fades. The ache becomes air. Because now, for the first time, you're not looking backward anymore. What if the ultimate form of power was to become emotionally unreachable? We leave behind all tactics of contact, distance, or games. We forge something new. Not a reaction, but a foundation. Unreachable, the new form of power. Can a man become so whole that even her memory can't enter? She might still be watching, that part doesn't matter. The real question is, can she still touch you? Not physically, that's the lesser domain. Can she touch your rhythm? Can she invade your sleep? Can she haunt your calm? There's a kind of man she can no longer reach, not because he blocks her number or disappears off the map, but because he becomes so structurally new, so internally sealed, that the frequencies she once thrived on, the emotional pressure points, the cycles of guilt and withdrawal, no longer exist. That's what it means to be unreachable. Not a man hiding from pain, but a man re-engineered by it. Not defense, not retreat, but power, redirected inward. Most men mistake disappearance for discipline. They change their number, delete the thread, avoid her street. But the more you try to escape her externally, the more you're still orbiting her internally. You're not unreachable if she still has the power to make you change your playlist. You are not unreachable if your silence is designed to get a reaction. You are not unreachable if you need her to notice that you're gone. True unreachability is not about her at all. It is about the vanishing of the wound she used to speak to. Pain wants an audience, so you perform. Your sadness wears cologne. Your healing becomes a narrative staged for mutual friends. You pretend you're not looking back, while walking backward the whole time. But the Stoic doesn't look away from pain. He walks through it with eyes open. He learns its language. He studies its rhythm. And eventually, he no longer needs it. This is the man who becomes unreachable. Not because he numbs the pain, but because he outgrows its utility. There is a silence that screams need. And there is a silence that ends need. Most men go quiet, hoping she'll miss them. A Stoic goes silent, because there is nothing left to say. He has said it all, to himself. In dark mornings, in still nights, in the space where pain used to rule. He's not punishing her, he's perfecting himself. That's the difference. To be unreachable is to become elemental. You don't chase warmth, you become fire. You don't seek shelter, you become stone. You don't demand peace, you are the calm before the storm. This is not about masculinity as performance. It's not about being cold to prove strength. It's about healing so deeply that the echoes no longer echo. It's about building internal walls, not to keep love out, but to keep identity in. To keep your values sealed, your time protected, your mind aligned. That way, when she remembers you, because she will, what she finds is not a man wounded by absence. She finds a fortress she can no longer enter. Not because the gates are locked, but because the blueprint has changed. There's a temptation in every man to leave a trail behind, to let her see he's doing better, to drop hints, show progress, lure her into regret. But what kind of strength needs an audience? What kind of transformation still seeks applause? The Stoic teaches, do the work and let the silence speak. You're not a ghost in her world. You're the storm that never returns. The lesson? Don't become unreachable for revenge. Become unreachable because there's nothing left in you that she could reach. Ask yourself, would you still be healing this way if no one was watching? Would you still be building if no one ever came back? Would you still be silent if it didn't make her curious? This is the audit. Most men fail it. They use healing as currency, for validation, for attraction, for leverage. But that's not healing, that's theater. And pain, dressed as performance, never stops bleeding. You want to be unreachable? Start here. Delete the fantasy, not just the photos. Stop turning pain into performance. Let go of the idea that closure must come from her. Return to yourself, not as you were, but as you must become. Train your nervous system to respond to silence with strength, not fear. Walk into a room and let the absence of desperation be your signature. That's the work, and it is unseen, but that's where all real power grows, in the places no one claps. She might try to reach you again. Maybe in months, maybe in years, not out of love, but out of memory. She won't recognize your tone. She won't find your wounds. She won't be able to locate the emotional doors she once walked through, because they're gone. Not locked, gone. That version of you, he didn't survive the fire. And that's good. Because in his place stands someone who's not avoiding the past. He's not erasing it either. He's simply built so far beyond it that the past can't even echo here. This is unreachability, not a tactic, not a punishment, a state, earned in silence, lived in power. The sound of real silence. How to speak through absence. What if your silence could teach her more than your words ever could? There is a silence that confuses, and there is a silence that teaches. Most men go silent and expect her to panic. But if she has seen it before, if silence is what every man chooses when he feels weak, then your silence is just another echo in a long corridor of noise. She won't hear it, she'll just walk around it. But there's a rare silence, an earned silence, that doesn't create confusion. It creates reflection. It makes her remember not what you said, but who you became when you stopped talking. And that silence has a sound. It plays in her mind when she's alone. It's not a shout, it's a mirror. Most men try to communicate their worth with speeches. They explain their pain, they plead their case. They tell her who she lost. But the truth is, if you still need to tell her, you haven't become it yet. The Stoic doesn't explain. He embodies. He lives his values so deeply that when he walks away, the space he leaves behind is louder than any message he could send. This is the paradox of real presence. It's most powerful in absence. But not all silence is sacred. Some silence is empty. It screams for attention. You post vague quotes, you drop subtle hints, you delete, then re-upload. You call it healing. But it's broadcasting. That's not silence. That's noise in disguise. Real silence isn't passive. It's not waiting to be noticed. It's an active commitment to remove your energy from anything that doesn't serve your structure. Not as revenge, not to make her feel loss, but to make yourself feel clean. Silence becomes power when it's paired with self-alignment. That means your words match your actions. Your habits match your values. Your absence isn't hollow, it's structured. You're not just not texting. You're meditating at dawn. You're lifting at noon. You're reading at night. You're journaling instead of reacting. You're eating like someone with vision, sleeping like someone with self-respect. Your silence speaks because you are speaking to yourself in the hours when most men are distracted. She doesn't hear from you, but the world starts to. Not through gossip, not through posts, through gravity. When you stop chasing, something strange happens. You start being felt. Even from across a city, across years. Because silence, when fused with transformation, doesn't need a voice. It echoes in reputation. It travels through whispers. Have you seen him lately? He looks different. He doesn't bring her up anymore. She hears it secondhand, and then her mind begins to wonder. Not because you tried to make her curious, but because you stopped needing her curiosity. And that is when your silence begins to speak. This is the secret of the Stoic exile. It is not absence from her, it is presence with you. You don't retreat into the shadows to hide, you retreat to build. The silence becomes your cathedral. Each day without contact becomes a brick. Each resisted impulse, a beam. Each breath taken alone, a foundation. Until one day, you don't just live in silence. You are the silence. And she walks through her days with echoes she can't trace, but can't ignore. Remember, the loudest sound a man can make is becoming who he said he would be. Not for her, not for anyone, but for the still, inner self that watched the heartbreak and whispered, "This is not the end." That voice is quiet, but it is eternal. And when you stop filling the silence with noise, you start to hear him again. He has no interest in revenge. He doesn't miss the fantasy. He's not scrolling for updates. He's building, quietly, brutally, beautifully. And the world around him adjusts. Because a man who has mastered his silence is a man no one can manipulate. Not through guilt, not through memory, not through desire. So ask yourself, is your silence just a pause in the noise? Or has it become a language? Can you walk into a room and say everything without speaking? Can your absence realign the energy? Not because you were loud, but because you were real. This is what women remember, not the texts, not the tears, but the man who disappeared and didn't break, the man who stopped explaining, stopped performing, stopped reaching, and in doing so, became unreachable and unforgettable. As we move forward, we explore the quiet crown of masculine mastery, the moment you forgive her, not to reunite, not to feel righteous, but to end the debt cycle and rise above the entire dynamic. The next silence is forgiveness. Forgiveness as mastery, releasing the debt she still owes. What if forgiving her wasn't about setting her free, but setting yourself above? There is a moment after silence, after the rage cools, after the memories fade from fire to ash. It's the moment when you no longer feel the need to win, to prove, to punish. And in that strange, still place, you face the final test. Can you forgive the one who hurt you, not because she asked, but because you've outgrown the story? Forgiveness is misunderstood. They think it means let her off the hook, forget what happened, act like it didn't matter. But the Stoic knows forgiveness is not release for them, it's release from them. It's the quiet realization that carrying emotional debt is a form of poverty, and you're done being poor. She may still owe you apologies, explanations, closure, but those are debts you no longer collect, not because they were paid, but because you stopped needing payment. You became the kind of man whose peace can't be purchased, whose dignity doesn't depend on repayment, whose throne is not built on justice, but on detachment. You let it go, not to erase it, but to transcend it. Here's the truth most men avoid. As long as you withhold forgiveness, you are still in relationship with her. Not physically, but energetically. You feed the bond by keeping score. You rehearse the betrayal. You update the ledger in your mind. She did this. She never said sorry. She doesn't deserve my peace. But here's the hard lesson. If your peace depends on her behavior, you're still under her rule. Forgiveness isn't surrender, it's sovereignty. Ask yourself, what would it feel like to not need an apology, not crave recognition, not burn with the need to be understood? That is what the Stoics call apatheia. Not apathy, but freedom from disturbance, a clear sky, unclouded by resentment, unmoved by ghosts. You don't forgive her to make peace with her. You forgive to end the cycle, to close the story, to walk off the page. And here's the paradox. When you forgive her fully, without need, without performance, that's when she might feel it most. Because now you've done the one thing she cannot manipulate. You've made her irrelevant. You've released her not with a door open, but with a silence that says, "I've returned to my throne, and your name is no longer spoken here." That kind of forgiveness is terrifying, because it means the bond is not twisted, not poisoned, not healed. It's gone. You've evaporated from her script. And that is the rarest form of power, to no longer be a character in the story where she betrayed you. This is how the Stoic becomes untouchable. He remembers, but he is not defined by memory. He felt, but he no longer bleeds. He saw her clearly and chose to rise anyway, not with noise, not with revenge, not with pity, with stillness, with grace, with silence that carries no venom because the wound is closed. And the crown? It fits better without bitterness. So write this down. Forgiveness is not about her. It is about what kind of man you want to be. One who needs closure, or one who is closure? One who still waits for justice, or one who becomes justice by choosing peace? Let her go, not as a favor, as a final act of strength. Let her wonder how you forgave her without ever calling. Let her feel the weight of her own actions. Alone. You have a kingdom to build. We descend into the sacred shadows, the place where your new identity is born.
Not the version of you she knew. Not the version that begged, proved, or explained, but the rare form, forged in silence, built in shadows, revealed to no one, especially not her. Final transmutation. Become the man you were meant to be. What if the heartbreak was never about losing her, but finding your final form? Everything changed, but not out there. The real transformation happened in silence, in the dark, where no one was watching. No posts, no performances, no revenge, just a quiet, brutal rebuilding. And now you understand. This heartbreak wasn't a mistake. It was an initiation. You were never meant to stay with her, because the version of you that would have stayed could never become the version you were meant to be. And now, that old version is dead. The man who has risen from those ashes wants nothing from her. Not clarity, not closure, not even to be understood. Because he found something she could never give him: himself. This is the final transmutation. Not just the end of a relationship, but the end of dependency. You don't chase what left, you don't fear what hurt, and you don't worship what broke. You don't wait for her to miss you. You've outgrown the need to be missed. You don't hope for her to return because you know she'd never find this man again. The final form of a man isn't built in love. It's forged in the loss of it. Not in desire, but in detachment. Not in being seen, but in standing alone and still choosing greatness. This man, the one you are now, he didn't come from pleasure. He came from the discipline of pain. And now, you're not avoiding heartbreak. You've used it, like fire, like steel, like myth. She cannot reach you now, not because she's blocked, but because you've outgrown the dimension where she existed.
You don't speak her language anymore. You don't crave validation. You don't explain your choices. You don't need her to see you, because you finally see yourself. And once a man sees himself, truly, no woman can ever define him again. You remember the days you begged for answers? You reread the messages. You looked for signs. You asked, why? Now you smile. Because you know the answer was never in her words, never in her reasons, never in her return. The answer was in what you became after she was gone. You became your own father, your own healer, your own witness, your own sword. You became the man who shows up for himself even when no one claps. You didn't need applause. You needed alignment. And now you walk with it. You no longer seek peace in her silence. You found peace in your own. You don't weaponize absence. You embody presence. You don't disappear to provoke. You disappear to evolve. You don't forgive to be noble. You forgive because the wound is irrelevant now. There's no sting left to nurse. There's only the lesson and the man it created. Now you train not for appearance, but for discipline. Now you work not to escape, but to build. Now you move not to be followed, but because stillness is death. Now you speak less, because your actions echo louder. You don't need to update her. You are the update. One day she might look again, from a distance, in silence, in curiosity. But she won't see the man she once knew. She'll see a shadow, a legend, a silhouette shaped by storms she never stayed for. She had a chapter, but not the whole book. And what about you? You don't look back, not in bitterness, not in hope. You walk forward, not to prove anything, but because you've become someone who doesn't stop. You're not healing anymore. You're ascending. You don't need closure. You became the door. This heartbreak was your forge. This pain was your teacher. This silence was your shrine. And now, the world doesn't get a broken man. It gets a reborn one. Whole, hungry, sacred. You are no longer waiting. You are becoming. Not a better man for her, a final man for yourself. This is the crown, the power, the arrival. The heartbreak didn't end you. It revealed you. This was never about her. It was about him. The man you buried under years of pleasing, proving, performing. Now he's back, silent, dangerous, free. And now, the world meets you as you were always meant to be, unshakable, unreachable, unapologetically alive. You are the final form, no longer a memory for her, a mystery to the world, and the mirror to every man still waiting to be born. Stay sacred. Stay unstoppable. Stay forged. You are now the legend she can never reclaim. You are now the man you were meant to be. And now, this is where the chain ends, but your legend begins. You've walked the fire. You've endured the silence. You've rebuilt in the shadows. You no longer need to chase, because you've become the thing worth chasing. It was a ritual, a return to self, a breaking of the old codes that kept you small, dependent, wounded. But here, at the end, you don't just survive heartbreak, you transcend it. You are no longer him, and you will never be him again. If this journey spoke to your soul, if it mirrored your silence, if it sparked even the faintest fire inside you, then don't let it end here. Subscribe, not just to the channel,
to a code of quiet strength, sacred purpose, and ruthless self-mastery. Every week, we go deeper into discipline, detachment, dominion, so that next time pain knocks, you don't flinch. You welcome it as the doorway to your next evolution. And until we meet again, stay unseen, stay unshakable, stay untouchable. This wasn't a story about heartbreak. It was the blueprint of becoming. See you in the next legend, where the silence speaks louder than ever.